Lesson 23. It is the most regrettable that certain words have acquired such an unsavory connotation. There are a number of words which are good words, descriptive words in all languages, but which, through misuse throughout perhaps centuries, have undergone a complete change of meaning. We could refer to the word mistress as an illustration. Just a few years ago, within the memory of our grandparents, the word mistress was an honorable one, indeed, indicating a lady who was to be respected as a mistress of the household, the lady of the house, a fit partner for the man of the house. By misuse, it has now acquired a meaning which is altogether different from that which it originally possessed. We are not going to talk about old mistress nor old masters, but it seemed an appropriate form of example because we are going to talk in this lesson about another word, the meaning of which has become distorted throughout the years. Imagination is a word which now is in sore disgrace. Years ago, a man of imagination was a man of sensitive ideas, one who could write, one who could compose music or poetry. It was, in fact, absolutely essential for a gentleman to be possessed of imagination. Nowadays, it appears that imagination indicates some poor, frustrated woman suffering from hysteria or on the verge of a mental breakdown. People brush off experiences which they would far better study with the exclamation, "Oh, it's all your imagination. Don't be so silly." Imagination, then, is a word, is in poor repute today, but controlled imagination is a key which can unlock many experiences which at which are at present locked in the veil of mystery which surrounds most people when they refer to occult matters. It is well to remember time and time again that in any battle between the imagination and the will, it is always the imagination which wins. People pride themselves upon their willpower, upon their indomitable courage, upon the fact that nothing frightens them. They assure bold listeners that with their willpower, they can do anything at all. The whole truth of the matter is that with their willpower, they can do nothing unless the imagination agrees to permit it. These people of much wanted willpower are actually those who have managed somehow to let the imagination believe that a good dose of willpower would be useful in this particular instance. We repeat, and any competent authority will agree with us that in the matter of imagination and willpower, it is without expectation, it is without exception, imagination that wins. There is no greater power. Do you still doubt that you can will yourself to do things when your imagination does not want you to? Consider this. Let us pose a hypothetical problem because that appears to be the modern way of doing things. We have before us a street devoid a traffic. There is no traffic about, there is no curious sightseers. So we have the whole street to ourselves. Let us paint a path, some 2 feet wide or 3 feet wide, 3 feet. If you prefer, from one side, walk to other, undisturbed by the thought of avoiding traffic or unperturbed by the serious stares of onlookers. You would have not the slightest difficulty nor hesitation in stepping off one sidewalk onto your 2 or 3 feet wide path and walk sedately across the road to the other sidewalk. This would not cause your breath rate to increase. It would not cause your heart to flutter. It would be one of the simplest things you had ever been called upon to do. Will you agree with us so far? You can walk along the printed pathway without a thought of fear because you know that the ground is not only going to give way beneath you, the ground is not going to give way to give way beneath you. You know that the expect that except in the case of an earthquake nor or a building falling over on top of you, you are quite safe. And if by some singular misfortune you should trip and fall to the ground, no great harm would be done because you cannot fall further than your own height. Now, let us alter the picture somewhat. Let us say that we are still in the street and we move to a building which is about 20 stories high. We will get into the elevator and move upwards up to the beautifully flat roof. As we stand on the roof and we look across the street, we observe that we are quite level with another building 20 stories high just across from us. If we look over the fall and down at the roadway beneath, we can just see the painted lane that we made. Now, now we are going to have a board 2 or 3 feet wide. In other words, a board precisely as wide as B or 3 feet wide. In other words, a board precisely as wide as was our painted line. We will stretch it across the street 20 stories high across the street, and we will anchor it so firmly that it cannot move. We will anchor it so securely that it cannot sway or bounce. We will examine it most carefully to see that there is nothing at all which could trip you or make your footsteps uncertain. You have the same width of pathway as you did on the ground level. Can you walk across that plank which is fixed securely 20 stories above the street and reach the other side of the street, reach the roof of the other building? If your imagination says you can, then indeed you can, and without any great trouble. But if your imagination is not so compla- complacent, then your pulse will raise at the mere thought of it. You will feel butterflies in the stomach. You might even feel worse than that. But why? You have already walked across the road. So why can you not walk across his beautifully firm board? The answer is, of course, that your imagination starts working. Your imagination tells you that here is danger, that is that if you slip, if you falter, you will step off the edge of the broad, you will fall 20 stories down to destruction. It does not matter how much one tries to reassure you, unless your imagination can be assured, no amount of willpower can help. If you try to assert your will, power of if you try to assert your willpower, you will you might have a nervous breakdown. You will start to tremble. You will turn pale and your breath will to come in stertorous, stertorous gasps. We have certain mechanisms built into us which protect us from danger. Certain automatic safeguards are built into the human mechanism so that a human cannot normally run into foolish danger. Imagination makes it almost impossible for a person to walk the plank, and no amount of telling would enable a person to realize that it really was perfectly safe. You need to imagine that you can do it. Until you really can imagine yourself stepping up to the plank, getting into it, and walk firmly and confidently across, then you cannot do it. If one wills oneself to do thing, when the imagination says no, then one does indeed risk a nervous breakdown, for we are going to repeat once again that in any battle between the imagination and the willpower, the imagination always wins, forcing up oneself to do something when all the alarm signals are clanging within us can wreck one's nerves, wreck one's health. Some people are desperately afraid of passing a graveyard on a lonely road at midnight. If the occasion arises when they have to pass a cemetery at night, they feel their scalp tingle, their hair stands on end, their palms begin to perspire, and every perception is heightened, every impression is exaggerated, and they are indeed keyed up to make a prodigious leap to safety should the appearance of a ghost apparently call for escape. People who do not like their work and have to force themselves to do their work often bring into use an escape mechanism. Some of these escape mechanisms lead to rather weird results. They may be blessings in disguise, because if warnings are not heeded, mental breakdowns can occur. We are going to relate an actual instance which is well known to us. We know the relate we are going to relate an actual instance which is well known to us. We know the instance, we know the man, and we know the result. Here it is. This man of our acquaintance did a lot of standing. He stood at one of the one of those tall desks and entered figures in a ledger. His work was such that he had to stand. The work could not be done easily sitting down. The man was competent at his work. He was good at these figures, but he had a phobia. He was truly desperately afraid that somebody, somehow, he would make a mistake and perhaps be accused of embezzling a sum of money from his employers. Actually, the man was painfully honest. He was one of those rare individuals who make hard work of honesty. One of those individuals we would not even take a packet of book matches from a hotel or would not even keep a newspaper which he found on a bus seat. But even so, he was afraid that his employers did not know of his honesty, and that made him feel very bad indeed about his work. For a number of years, he went about the work becoming more and more unhappy, more and more preoccupied. He discussed a change of work with his wife, but she had no sympathy with him. And so he kept to the same job, but the imagination got to work also. First, the man got gastric ulcers. With careful attention and diet, those ulcers were cured, and he returned to standing at the desk. It occurred to him one day that if he did not have the ability to stand, then he would not have the ability to keep that job. Some weeks later, an ulcer appeared on his foot. For a few days, he hobbled to the work and endured great pain, but the ulcer got worse and he had to remain in bed for a long time. Being in bed, being away from his office, his recovery was quite speedy, and then he went back to work. All the time, his subconscious mind was nagging him. It reasoned, one supposed, something like this. Well, I got out that horrible job by having a food complaint. They cured me too quickly, so let me have a worse food complaint. A few months after the man returned, presumably cured, he got another ulcer, this time on the ankle. It was such a bad ulcer that he could not move his ankle. Eventually, he was taken to hospital, and as the ulcer became worse and worse, he had to have an operation. After this, he was discharged, cured, and went back to his job. Now the hatred of the job was growing on him. Soon, another ulcer appeared, this time between the ankle and the knee. This time, it was so bad, resisting all efforts to cure it, that he had to have his leg amputated at the knee. This time, to his great joy, the employer would not have him back, saying that he would not have a cripple around, a cripple who was always falling sick. The doctors at the hospital knew quite a lot about this case, and so they arranged for the man to do some other work for which he had shown considerable aptitude. while in hospital. It was a form of handicraft instruction. He liked the work and had much success at it. There was now no fear that he would go to prison for some mistake, which would cause him to be accused of embezzling. So his health improved, and so far as is known at the present time, he is carrying on this work and making a success at it. This is rather an extreme case, true, but every day we see high pressure businessmen who are in fear of their jobs, in fear of their employer, or in fear of losing face, working at high internal pressures and then seeking to escape by way of gastric ulcers. Gastric ulcers, in fact, are known as executive complaint. Imagination can topple an empire. Imagination can build an empire as well. Remember, if you will cultivate your imagination and control it, you can have whatever you want. It is not possible to dictate to your imagination, not possible to tell it what it shall do, because friend imagination is something like friend mule. You can lead a mule, but you cannot drive him. And so you can lead your imagination, but you cannot drive it. It needs practice, but it can be done. Well, how are you going to set about controlling your imagination? It is a matter of faith, of practice. Think of same situation which excites your fear or your distaste, and then overcome it by faith, by persuading your imagination that you can do a thing no matter what others can do or cannot do. Persuade yourself that you are some special sort of being. If you like, it does not matter what method you adopt to yourself, so long as you get your imagination working on your behalf. Let us revert to our original illustration about crossing the street. Let us decide that we can easily cross the street on a two plank resting across the roadway. Then, by faith, by thinking that we are not as others, we can persuade our imagination that we can cross the plank even though it be elevated 20 stories above the ground. Think of this. Tell yourself that even a more or less brainless monkey can cross that plank with no fear at all. Who is better, you or a brainless monkey? If a brainless monkey or a person who is almost an idiot can cross that plank, then surely you, a much better person, can do also. It is merely question of practice, of having faith. In the past, there have been famous tightrope walkers such as Blondin, who crossed a rope many times over the Niagara Falls. Blondin, Blondin was just an ordinary man who had faith in his abilities. He had faith that he could cross where other men can, other men could do it, could not. He knew that the only thing to be afraid of was of being afraid. He knew that if he was confident of going across, then he could cross no matter if he was pushing a we'll borrow, or if he was blindfolded. We all get the same sort of experience. We climb up a long ladder, and as long as we look up, we experience no fear. But as soon as we look down, the thought occurs to us that we would make an awfully bad mess if we fell off the ladder and then crashed. Our imagination then pictures ourselves falling, pictures us being smeared many, many feet below. Our imagination might picture us clinging so tightly to that ladder that we cannot free ourselves. Steeple jacks have had that type of experience. If you control your imagination by building up faith in your own abilities, you can do anything. You cannot succeed in overcoming your imagination by force. Exercising your willpower will not overcome your imagination. It will instead build up a neurosis within you. Remember once again that you must at all times lead your imagination, control your imagination. If you try to drive your imagination, you will fail. If you will lead your imagination, you will be able to do all those things which you thought would be impossible for you. First of all, though believe that there is no such things as impossible.